Yeah.
What about the religious nature of some of the inscriptions you found? I imagine it differs depending on the projected or provisional dating of the inscriptions, but what can you say from that perspective?
So unfortunately, with the Thamudic inscriptions, we're completely lost in time. We have no chronological anchor for the Thamudic inscriptions to be able to tell us when exactly they were carved. The most we can do is compare their letter shapes with other corpora and make some assumptions like that. So the inscriptions around Taif and near Mecca are similar in their style to the inscriptions around the northern Hijaz, central Hijaz, like around Yathrib and further north. There's only one dated inscription from that area, and it dates to 267 CE.
Okay.
So it's and we can't really extrapolate. We have no idea. So we're sort of lost in time when it comes to the Thamudic inscriptions. We can simply say that they're pre-Islamic, but whether they're 500 years, 1,000 years, it's impossible to say. But what's fascinating is all the Thamudic inscriptions we documented, not a single religious invocation. If you were to take them on face value,
a lot of longing, but not a lot of longing for a god or a god.
Yes, precisely. They're secular, they're worldly, which contrasts with Safavidic, for example, or even in the north, the Thamudic inscriptions from Hayil in the Najd north. They are filled with religious statements. Every other inscription is invoking some god or another, whereas here they're not, which is very interesting. But when you move to the 6th century, we document 6th century Arabic script inscriptions.
Right.
The Arabic script, these are inscriptions that paleographically fit in the, let's say, century before Islam, or can also be contemporary with early Islam, the beginnings of Islam. These texts continue the trend that we see across the Arabian Peninsula, that they have a monotheistic vocabulary. There's no invocation to the ancient gods, but rather they're invoking the one God using terms like Al-Ilah, using terms like Allah, using terms like Rabb. And this is, so the area around Taif basically is in line with the trend that we see everywhere. So there's a huge, relatively huge. 30 years ago, if you opened up an article on Arabic script inscriptions before Islam, there were 4 maybe. Mm-hmm. Now there's probably around 40. So the corpus is expanding and it continues to grow. Mm-hmm. And of this, anytime there's any information that has to do with religious identity, it is, broadly speaking, monotheistic. And what do I mean by monotheistic is that it does not mention the ancient gods that we know so well from the pre-Islamic inscriptions.
We could say with some degree of confidence, now that we have more than just a handful of inscriptions, that monotheism arrives to the Arabian Peninsula, and now with your work, even to the Central Arabian Peninsula, not with Islam, but before Islam.
I would say that, and of course, that's the Quran is obviously the witness to the same thing, because the Quran is engaging with a monotheistic audience too. So what we are actually finding now is very much in line with the picture of Arabia that we get from the Quran. It's no surprise. It is the picture. It contrasts with the picture of Arabia that we get in, for example, Kitab al-Asnam from Ibn al-Kalbi. That picture of Arabia,
sort of idolatrous pagan culture.
Yes, precisely. Because you see, we could put the area of Taif aside, but when we look at other places, for example, like Dumat al-Jandal was supposedly the center of the worship of Wad, as we get in the Kitab al-Asnam. But the inscriptions available to us from Dumat al-Jandal show that before Islam, their main deity was called Al-Ilah, the God.
Yeah, the God.
And they like to put crosses on the inscriptions as well.
Which is it's actually a little hint of something.
And what's even just as I love Dumat, the case of Dumat al-Jandal as a laboratory, because see, Dumat al-Jandal has an uninterrupted epigraphic documentation that stretches back to the middle of the 1st millennium BCE. Mm-hmm. And it documents the pagan phase where they had all these gods and everything. And then, of course, the transition to Al-Ilah. Okay, so that's all there in the fossil record. Who is the God who was never invoked at Dumat al-Jandal any time in the pre-Islamic period is Wad.
That's
He
incredible.
never was there. Wad was in ancient Yemen. Yeah, Wad was in ancient Yemen.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, as you said, it seems to me that this lines up with the Quran's engagement with monotheism. Even in, if someone follows the chronology and likes to divide the Quran between Meccan and Medinan surahs, also in the Meccan surahs, there's engagement with Judaism and Christianity and Jewish and Christian ideas. But it does, in textbooks, we tend to read that, Arabia was the last pagan island in a sea of monotheism in the Middle East. And this is really, really important for helping us nuance that picture. And it's important too, not only for the study of Islam's origins, but also for the history of Christianity in the Middle East. Presumably Judaism too, but a number of the inscriptions, as you mentioned, are explicitly Christian. And so, they give us a sense of presumably missionary activity that was, even if perhaps, not sure where we stand on this question, even if the Bible was perhaps not yet translated into Arabic, there was still missionary activity, it seems, and Christian communities in Arabia.
I would add one thing to that. We have to always remember also that pagan is not a term of self-identification. And so, when we have the diffusion of biblically inspired monotheism, we can say, to different parts of Arabia, we don't know what they did with their ancient gods. Was there a period where they became monotheists, but relegated, and this is an idea that's in the literature as well, relegated the ancient gods to subordinate roles under the new monotheistic God? Or did they, for example, think that transform them into spirits, or did they abandon them altogether? That much is not clear yet from the inscriptional evidence. So, but when we do get terms like pagan, this is of course always put on people from a purist point of view, from a point of view of,
yes,
let's say, real monotheism.
I think I've been called a pagan before. I'm sure of it, actually.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Terrific. Well, I'm so grateful for your generosity with time and wisdom, and it's great to learn from you, Ahmad. Thank you so much. Do you want to mention any things you have going on now, future projects, next steps in your academic journey?
Well, I'll just mention two things. The first is that the second edition of the Safavidic grammar should be released sometime next year, first half of next year. And another book that will be released open access in February of 2022 is The Religion and Rituals of the Nomads of Pre-Islamic Arabia, a reconstruction based on the Safavidic inscriptions. So what this book attempts to do is reconstruct traditional Arabian religion, reconstruct reconstruct Arabian paganism, not by the impressions of outside writers, not as it's remembered in the Islamic times, but by practitioners of this belief system's texts themselves.
Great. Terrific. Yeah. Great. Well, I'd really encourage everyone to follow Professor Al-Jallad's work. And also, thanks for being here on this channel. Take a moment to like and subscribe to Exploring the Quran and the Bible. And Ahmed, this was great. Thank you so much, and best wishes for all your next steps.